Code agents, welcome to another show. And today we have an amazing guest with us. But first, I want to say hi to Nick. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, thank you so much, Tristan, for acknowledging my existence.
I just wanted to say hello to you, buddy. I missed you.
I know. I missed you too. We can only like digital hug lately.
I know, man. Well, we've got Saul Klein with us, a longtime friend and a massive influencer in this industry. And Saul is here because that's our connection to Lawrence, who he's going to introduce. Saul, thanks for being with us, my friend.
Hey, Tristan, it's great to be here. Nick, great to see you. And it's great to be here with Lawrence. You guys reached out to me and said, can we get Lawrence? And of course, I had no idea, but Lawrence is out there. He's trying to do everything he can to reach people. And he agreed to be here to speak with us today. And I always enjoy listening to Lawrence. And if you haven't heard him before, you know, he's been with NAR since I think 2000 as an economist. In 2007, became the chief economist. You look at all the surveys and all the research, it's all done by Lawrence and his team. And undergraduate degree at Purdue, College Park, Maryland for your PhD. I know I went to the Naval Academy right down the road. And so, Lawrence, it's great to have you. Thank you so much for coming here, share your wisdom with us, and let us know what you think's going on in the world today, particularly in the real estate marketplace.
Thank you, Saul, for the introduction, and thank you for being a good friend over the years. Back in 2007, when I was appointed as a chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, it was a tough environment. The sales were coming down rapidly. The foreclosures were rising. Prices were collapsing. This time around, it is a very tough environment currently. I think it's going to be temporary. This is a government-imposed economic lockdown, not about any overstretching in the economy. So what's the prospect? Of course, you know, it's uncharted waters, unprecedented, unique events. So it is much more difficult to say how everything will play out, but facts are facts. So let's review a few facts. One is that unlike 2008, 2009 Great Recession, we don't have the subprime lending overstretching people's budget that exploded. So fortunately, going into the pandemic, the mortgage condition was very sound. The second difference, facts. Back in 05, 06, preceding the Great Recession, home builders went wild. They overproduced. So there was an oversupply once the subprime mortgages began to explode, and therefore the inventory situation, I will use the industry jargon, 13, 14 months supply. You know, those are extremely large number of inventory in relation to the demand. What is the inventory situation today? 3 months supply, because builders have been underproducing for multiple years. So I think the home prices will be very fine. The question is, the second quarter will be absolutely awful on every economic data, whether it is vehicle sales, GDP, home sales. It will look, you know, 30, 40% decline from 1 year before. The third and fourth quarter, we will see a rebound. I'm not sure about the strength of the rebound, but it will be a positive direction. But through this, one thing that will be holding steady is home prices, because there's no oversupply. And some of the survey that we have been conducted on a weekly basis, there's no panic among home sellers. And the buyers, maybe they face that housing shortage, so they know that it's hard to pick up a bargain in the current environment.
Wow, that's a lot. All right.
Well, Lawrence, I just wanted to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, buddy.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I appreciate Lawrence's honesty, right? Like saying that, listen, we're going to have to brace for a second quarter that's not going to be so great, right? But it's not just real estate that's going to be in that boat. It's going to be everything. And so you're not sugarcoating it, and I really appreciate that. I think there's too much sugarcoating going on, but we also don't want agents to, at the same time, feel like that because of that they should just stop, right? Because we're gonna get out of it. And you made a really great point. Look, this isn't 2007, 2008. It wasn't because of the banks, right? It's because of it's because of something that was completely unforeseen, and we will see our way out of it, hopefully much sooner than we did in 2007, 2008, which I'm hopeful for. Lawrence, do you think that that is the case? Do you think we'll see our way out of it quicker?
So it will depend upon the path of the virus, vaccine discovery, and so forth, which we really don't know. But one thing that is happening right now is the massive stimulus package into the system. And the spirit of the stimulus is to say that the economy was performing fine, Americans were working hard, entrepreneurs made the right decisions, and suddenly everything is falling apart. The American people should not suffer because of the government-imposed lockdown. So, for example, unemployment insurance check, extra $600 per week on top of what states offer. I believe on average in the US, there will be a little more than $1,000 per week for people receiving unemployment check because of that enhancement. And if you think about a person who had worked as, say, cashier at Macy's, who now does not have a job, the unemployment insurance check could be actually higher than what they were making. Now, for most people, it's not replacing the total income. Maybe it's replacing 70% of the income or 80% of the income. But we made sure during the lobbying to say realtors were working hard and they should not suffer the consequence of this lockdown. So the independent contractors are also eligible for it. The $600 enhance plus whatever state offers. And during this temporary disruption, realtors should tap into all the resources that is available. So at least there's some little level of support, and hopefully by third and fourth quarter, we are back moving in the right direction. Some businesses would be up and running 100%, barbershops, the hair salons, dental offices, daycare, but other industry, cruise ships, you may take a couple of years to fully get back up and running.
Somebody asked a question in the chat over here. It's Lizette, and she's asking, and I think it's a great question. And obviously, some states are hit harder than others. I'm in Michigan. We're hit very hard. We're not considered essential. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. So I would assume that the states that are hit the hardest in terms of cases and death rates, we're going to see a market that's lower than states in other countries. But does it all kind of play into one giant market? Or, because there's states like Wyoming and Montana, and they're social distanced by default, right? So could you see every state getting hit this way, or will it be kind of a state-by-state case?
Well, all real estate is local in any time. And with the variation in the lockdown, I heard that one realtor was almost arrested in Pennsylvania for visiting a home because in Pennsylvania, real estate is considered non-essential. While where I am here in Virginia, real estate transactions still can be conducted using social distance protocol. So if one look at the pending contracts, Virginia is down more moderately. When I say moderate, it's just relative term. But compared to, say, Michigan and Pennsylvania, it may be down 70 or 80% from 1 year before in the month of April. But in Virginia, it's down only about 30%. It will be very interesting to see what happens in Georgia as Georgia opens up and people really feel comfortable going to a restaurant? Or maybe we look at how Germany plays out, because European countries went through this virus much earlier than us. So they are reopening the economy earlier than us. So Germany is reopening, and let's see how that goes. But a lot of uncertainty out there.
Lawrence, I think a key driver is jobs. Because if you've got jobs, then people can qualify for loans. And if people can qualify for loans, then they can buy property. And so if jobs don't come back quickly, do you see that affecting the way the real estate? It just seems logical to me that jobs is the key thing to watch. And as we see an increase in jobs, we'll see more confidence. People have money again. But if they don't have money, they're not going to be out trying to get loans. And then I'm curious about all of the loans that are in the pipeline now. If we don't see employment coming back, what percentage of those might fall out? Have we even seen the worst of the fallout before we see it coming back based on this loss of employment and jobs? And by the way, great job by NAR to get the independent contractor for realtors to be able to apply for unemployment. Just an amazing thing. Those of us who have been around for a while know that that was always deemed an impossibility for realtors to have that in independent contractor status to be able to draw unemployment. That was a great achievement. But anyway, jobs and how would that work?
Well, without going into the inside baseball on politics too much, but there was a congressional staff draft a bill. We had our lobbyists review it and say, can we insert this line? And they said, how do you insert it? So well, we actually wrote it into the bill. Part, and then of course other members of Congress agreed with what was written, and fortunately was passed. And also for the brokers, Small Business Administration loan, the economic disaster relief, and this money often do not have to be paid back if it meets certain criteria. But going to your question about jobs, of course, jobs are very, very important, and we hope that a good percentage of jobs that are lost return as the economy reopens. But let me give you one example. September 11th, tragic events that occurred, and the economy was already slowing. Event occurred, we went to a recession. But we came out of the recession, it was a fairly short recession, and the jobs came because of the stimulus measure that was in place, especially a lot of disaster relief money going into New York. And New York home sales actually increased the following year, home prices increased. So how is that possible? And one of them is 70% of people with job have a secure job. So when they see low mortgage rates, and that's what happened after September 11th, mortgage rate went down. So when they see low mortgage rate, they try to take advantage of that situation. Today, we have mortgage rate at near 3% all-time low. So some people with secure job may want to take advantage of this situation. But of course, we want more people the opportunity, so we have to hope for the job recovery. I'm going to be very factual. Second quarter is going to be quite ugly. And in terms of the home sales, we are missing the spring buying season. And the autumn buying and winter buying cannot make up for the loss in the spring buying season. So overall home sales could be down about 10% this year. Home prices will be steady. But the jobs also will be such that second quarter is so negative. The year as a whole, I think could be about 4 million jobs lost total. But some of the numbers that we see recently, about 20 million people filing for unemployment insurance, that also means about 15 million should be able to return to their jobs as the economy begins to recover.
Very good.
You're muted, buddy.
Sorry, I have a quick question. Thank you, Nick. There's a few questions, and it all pertains around the same thing. Lawrence, have you and the NAR or anybody else or other economists talked about what happens if the virus it comes back stronger? So let's say everybody is released early, and now because this comes and hits us stronger, like a lot of people are saying the Spanish flu did back in the day. What happens then? Are we planning for that? Do we have any backup plans?
So I'm not a healthcare expert, but if we do have a second wave, obviously it's a second disaster that we face. We don't want to have a repeat of the Spanish flu, where I think something like 30 or 40 million people die globally. I mean, safety is the most important issue to assure. But it's interesting to look at like South Korea. People are walking in the street. The restaurants are actually full, but they separated the tables so there's a social distancing part. When people are walking, they have the gloves, the masks on, always observing the social distancing. And it appears that South Korea has surely flattened the curve. There does not appear to be any resurgence. So social distancing itself may work, or maybe it will not work, and we will see that. But if there is a second wave, then it will require even greater stimulus measure. I think the government will not just step away; they will provide more funding. But one also has to ask, where is the government getting the money for the unemployment check, all the stimulus money that has been placed into the economy? To make it short, Federal Reserve is printing a lot of money and providing the money to the federal government to spend that money. So if America was not America, printing of the money means high inflation. But America has this extraordinary privilege, which is the US dollar. people trust the dollar in times of uncertainty. Because of that, we are not seeing inflation, but nonetheless, we should ask ourselves, what if we get a little high inflation 4, 5, 6 years from now? People who lived through the 1970s remember inflation was about 10%, everything 10% higher, next year another 10%. Well, if people want to hedge against inflation, people buy gold as a hedge. But what is other? Real estate is a good hedge because real estate value also increases. Furthermore, people who have fixed rate mortgages, their monthly payment is always the same, even though everything else is rising. So we may have that situation where there's a demand for real estate in future years as a hedge against inflation.
You know, you make a great point, Lawrence. So when all this money comes into the economy, whenever throughout history, when the government spends a lot, puts a lot of money in, then there's all kinds of economic opportunity gets created from all that money coming in. Now, no, that money's not always spent wisely, but even that doesn't matter. When a lot of money comes into the economy, lots of opportunity, lots of spending, lots of potential for growth takes place. And then, but the fear has always been inflation, because when you have too many dollars chasing too few goods, that concept, right? You get inflation. You just made a great point about the strength of the dollar as an asset we don't often think of. But even if there is inflation, the assets that work the best during times of inflation are what we refer to as equity assets, and of course gold, but real estate. And for those of us that have lived through those times of great inflation and we're fortunate enough to own real estate, we can vouch for that that's exactly what happens, and that real estate becomes a lot more valuable. So that's the upside to the downside, I guess, of inflation coming back.
Yeah, very true. There's a great couple of questions here for you, buddy, and that's in regards to possible foreclosures or short sales. Do you see that possibly happening and there being an uptick of foreclosures and short sales, or do you anticipate the government helping enough so that doesn't happen, or prolongs it so that it doesn't happen?
Well, currently, the mortgage forbearance is up to 6 months. And then if person is still facing hardship, they can extend it for additional 6 months. It is automatic after a person talks to the mortgage servicer. Don't do it on your own. They talk to the mortgage servicer first to say you are facing hardship, and the mortgage servicer will check the loan to see if it is backed by Fannie or Freddie or it has an FHA, and then they will provide their forbearance. But even if it's not Fannie and Freddie backed, say jumbo mortgages, many mortgage servicers are permitting this, just trying to follow the example of the government. And it's not a free lunch. It's just that whatever missed payment is just tacked on at the end of the life of the loan. Just in case if it's a balloon payment, avoid that. Try to negotiate to say, no, I don't want the balloon payment. Just pass it on to the additional payment at the end of the life of the loan. So that will help prevent foreclosure. But we also have to think about that we had a housing shortage before the pandemic, and we wanted more inventory. So the first initial phase of some foreclosure increases, I think the market can easily absorb, but it's not going to be like what happened 10 years ago, the massive foreclosures. Some states, naturally, if they are struggling to create jobs, Michigan was one example. When the auto industry collapsed 10 years ago, Michigan really suffered in terms of job losses, the depth of the decline, slowness of the recovery. But so there is a state-by-state variation, but I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that the stimulus measure for mortgage forbearance will limit the foreclosures so you will not do a economy-wide damage.
Lawrence, the fear I have around forbearance is forbearance doesn't really seem like a solution. It seems like a Band-Aid, but at the end of the 3 months or the 6 months or whatever it is, the person who didn't have a job, who couldn't make the payments, not only owes the payments, they owe the money from the past. And because all these loans are individual contracts that then get sold in the secondary market, that can get securitized, it seems like you almost need somebody to come in and say, almost a national standard for forbearance Otherwise, you are going to have a lot of foreclosures, not like massive necessarily, but you're going to have foreclosures in different markets because for a lot of people, it's not realistic to think they could come up with a monthly payment plus the last 4 or 5 or 3 that they missed. So is there any
that's the thing. So the missed payment, negotiate so that it is just tacked on towards the end of the life of the loan rather than making a balloon payment. So hopefully this buys some time for the person to find that new job within the 12 months so that once they have the job, they make the mortgage payment as before, yet all the missed payment is just tacked on towards the end, which means that if they have to sell their home, they have less equity part. So it's not a free lunch, but at least it gives a little time to say, find a job and then begin to pay the normal mortgage payment again.
So great point.
Okay, so
you should have a forbearance strategy, right? A forbearance strategy.
So hopefully, essentially what will happen is if they lose their job and they're unemployed for 6 months, they go back to work, they sell their house a few years later, they'll just owe those 6 months unless they pay it back sooner. They'll owe it at closing.
Yeah, that's
so it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not like you have to then chalk it up, right when you get a job if you owe like, 15 or 20 grand. It's not ideal, but how else could you do it really, right? Without things going under.
Yeah. And also, again, that unemployment insurance, the enhanced payments, so at least that provides some level of income support. So hopefully during that mortgage forbearance period, they sock away some of that, whatever income that is flowing into the family. Ideally, people want to have income from job, not through the unemployment check, but at least that's an enhanced unemployment check that's coming in.
Hey, Lawrence, I got a quick question here from the group. Melanie Ruiz, she asked, because earlier you said that Q2, we're going to see a decline. Maybe you clarified this earlier, but will we see a decline in activity in terms of buyers and sellers? Will we see a decline in the value of homes? Where do you think we're going to see a decline, and where's the steepest decline going to be, you think?
The decline is not in the value. So values will hold steady. So decline is in the pending contracts, closed contracts, and the listings. Far fewer listings during this pandemic period. So we may see nationwide about 30 or 40% decline in, say, April and May versus the April and May of the prior year.
Yeah, I think right now in Oakland County, Michigan, where I am, I think we're down about 21% from this time last year. So already very quickly we've seen, and that's a decline in the amount of listings on the market. So already we're seeing that. So that's interesting. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. There's one thing to have a decline in the value of your home, another thing to have a decline. So do you think we're going to see then home values decline then, or how are you going to evaluate that if houses aren't going to the market or things aren't selling as much? How are we going to be able to continue to, there's going to be fewer comps, right? How are you going to evaluate that?
The ultimate valuation will be determined by the transactions that occur. So a few months is few transactions, which means that data could be somewhat noisy because we don't have the thickness of the sample size to assess the value. But we had a housing shortage pre-pandemic. We have even fewer listings. And I think best way to gauge whether or not prices are falling is to say, for home buyers, are you able to pick up great bargain during the current period? And I think nearly all buyers will say, no, it's really tough to pick up a good bargain, which means the prices are not falling.
So you're going to see, so then essentially we'll probably see a seller's market then.
So it's a unique situation, far fewer listings, but also fewer buyers. But once the economy opens, there will be a surge of listings along with a surge of buying activity. 70% of the increase in listing is because people want to switch homes, trade up, trade down, different location. So the seller is also a buyer.
Lawrence, how about the commercial marketplace quickly? What's going to happen on the commercial side?
Commercial market is very tough because in terms of all the stimulus measure, if one talks to the language of the consumers, homeowners, the government officials are very sympathetic and trying to draft into it. But if there's a commercial property owners, they're less inclined to help, but unless one makes the argument that it has economic impact. Now, the retail sector was already in a trouble, even pre-pandemic as people were shopping online, but that was exacerbated during the pandemic. So you look at the Amazon stock prices, I mean, reaching all-time high through the pandemic because so much orders are coming online. And so you will see different sectors doing differently. You know, hotel is devastated. The apartment sector, because some rental payments are not coming in, you know, there's difficulty there, whether or not some of the apartment complexes that was financed by Fannie and Freddie, there could be some assistance related to that. And then you have the office space, which will be very interesting. We are doing this Zoom type of call. In fact, I think this may be my 30th Zoom event this week. People are becoming very comfortable just meeting through Zoom, which means that do people really need to go back to office? I would say yes, but maybe not so frequently, which means that people may say, I don't have to live so close to my job center. I can live much more further out. So we may have a revival of exurbs, far away suburb areas with a little more elbow room, maybe a dedicated office space, rather than trying to live in, say, high-rise, high-density style living in downtown centers.
Lawrence,
Lawrence, so I just have a quick question. Sorry, Tristan, real quick. So are you saying that Zoom created the pandemic in order to drive sales? No, I'm kidding. So let's Joe, listen, we need a little comedy break for a second every time.
Thank you, Nick. All right. He's also going to the comedy show across the street from you.
No, I can't go because of social distancing.
It's a Zoom call. Lawrence, quick question. It might be the last question because I know we've only got you for a couple more minutes here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was only 30 minutes.
What are your thoughts about oil prices and how they're impacting our market, our real estate market?
Oil prices, when it declined, it generally helps America. Except for a few states, Louisiana, to some degree, the Houston area, Oklahoma, Alaska, I mean, they are dependent upon oil, but most other states are consumers of oil. So low oil prices helps in terms of less money expended on energy. But this is really a war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. The three top oil producers are US, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. Those three countries sort of rotate as to who is the largest oil producer in any given year. But there's an all-out war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. And also, they don't like the US frackers. They want to put US frackers out of the business so that later with limited supply, maybe the prices will go up. So there's all this geopolitics game along with business strategy. But for the current US broad economy, it is a slightly net positive because most US states are consumers of oil. Low oil prices means that one do not have to expend so much on oil, so they have more money to spend elsewhere.
I love it. Guys, any questions in closing? Because we've got 2 minutes. Saul, any questions you have for Lawrence here?
Well, I just say two things, Lawrence. I love my two favorite publications are the Survey of Home Buyers and Sellers and the Member Profile. Every year I use those. They're great resources, and they come out of your department, and they're free this year, right? So people should know that, I think.
From NAR, we understand the tough times that members are facing. So we have something called Right Tools right now. What that means is that certain products we're either providing free or at a deep discounted price. Some of the educational courses, which have some price, is either free or at discounted prices. So go to NAR website, and during this time when you are at home, maybe use that period to learn so that once one comes out of the pandemic, you come out with more knowledge.
Hey, Lawrence, I have one extra question from somebody that's actually a really good question. Stephanie Sabo, she wants to know when people actually start getting, they're laid off, or they're furloughed, and then they start going back to work. A lot of times lenders require, a certain amount of time to be employed. What's going to happen? Are lenders going to be giving people a hard time? Are they going to still keep those regulations in place when people start to get rehired? Because that's going to slow down the market as well, because you got 25 million people unemployed, and if they have to show like 2 years in a job, that's going to be an issue. What do you think is going to happen there?
So the speed of the stimulus package was to let's get it out there quickly. Some issues were overlooked, but the one issue that we did not overlook was to say that people who are getting laid off, not only should they get an unemployment check for that disruption, but their credit score should not be hit if they are missing out on the mortgage payment. So all these credit conditions should not be impacted. That was part of the stimulus. But if there was something that we overlooked, again, we're going to go back to Congress and to say that this is not the fault of the hardworking Americans. This is temporary disruption caused by the government, and therefore it would be unfair in that example.
I love it.
Great answer.
Great answer.
Lawrence, thanks for being on. Guys, if you want more of Lawrence, go to NAR, the website. And Saul, thank you for connecting us as well.
Yeah, and you can also call him no, I'm kidding.
And that's right, guys. Remember, Nick is going to have a Zoom comedy show soon, so tune in for that. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. Lawrence.
I thought I was on.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lawrence. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Tristan.